I'm here with Pat Mathewson, who's the new Student Association President. We won by 50 votes in the election. It was pretty close between you and your flatmate. Before we get on to some of the stuff you're going to be dealing with this year, do you just want to maybe talk to the freshers and say the most important elements of the St Andrews experience?
I was asked this yesterday actually, and I think one of the most important things, or the things that you'll come to realize so quickly, is what a unique community we have here, and this incredible sense of, I don't know, we do have, as a university and as a students union, have a very paternal feeling towards our students. Maybe that's not quite the right term, but the level of pastoral care that we give towards our students is truly exceptional. And then on top of that, you have such a vibrant student community in terms of 150 societies. Faye, our DOSDA, came up with a statistic. We have the highest ratio, or the lowest ratio, of students to society. So it's something like 59 students to every one society, and that is the best in the UK. So we have this incredible entrepreneurial spirit amongst students that get stuck in a variety of ways. They're invariably terribly bright, but they're also well-rounded. And it makes for a very vibrant and interesting student community.
Mm-hmm. Something you've been quite vocal on is the independence referendum,
yes,
which will be coming up very quickly,
yes,
just after Freshers Week. What have you said you wanted to have some reassurances from the Scottish Government as
yes,
to what would happen? What's happened with that?
So right now I'm in dialogue with my counterparts at other universities such as Edinburgh, and we're looking into most likely an open letter or something. We're looking for reassurances along the lines of research council funding. That mostly would affect postgraduates, but it's a huge funding base for our university and many others. That kind of clarity. I understand that as an American, I feel I don't exactly have the same right to speak to the cultural implications of Scottish independence or the wider nationalistic feeling. So I derive all my views on it mostly from my role as president, for institutionally looking at what is the risk to us, what are the benefits to us. I feel very strongly right now that the union shouldn't take an official position one way or another, but should help facilitate debate and ensure the student body participates as best they can.
Another vote that's going to be coming up in the first semester is the rector's election. You were a rector's assessor last year. The rector is quite a unique position for Scottish universities. Do you want to maybe explain it and why it's important?
So the rector in law, and it's by the Universities Act of Scotland, which is hundreds of years old, is the president or chair of the University Court, which is the supreme governing body of the ancient universities in Scotland. We call the Board of Governors at any other university. We enjoy our pomp and circumstance. So the rector has that role, which over the years has become increasingly ceremonial, but does have a very important administrative purpose to that end. The rector is symbolic, is usually an ambassador for the university, but first and foremost at St Andrews they are the highest student, although officially they are not a student representative, they stand in their own right. They tend to be a very strong student advocate and champion. They are elected directly by students to this role, which is so incredibly unique. And many other universities would call it mad that they allow the students to elect the chairman of the board. But it's an incredibly powerful thing we have. So they tend to be a huge student champion and advocate and run surgeries a couple times a month, sitting and meeting with students on individual issues. They and their assessor tend to serve as the heavier artillery when things go wrong for individual students. At our university they also manage the Rector's Fund, which supports summer internship schemes for students who otherwise wouldn't be able to pursue them, help them support their career aspirations. But all in all, that's a huge part of university life here, and we're looking forward to making that as big an event as we can.
If you were to ask most students the main problem in St Andrews, I think almost everyone would agree it's accommodation.
Yes.
It's a massive problem. What advice would you give freshers on the situation?
Well, freshers are a different breed, mostly because the university, for the most part, guarantees accommodation for incoming first years. So for freshers, they are sorted in the immediate term, but a few months in they have to start thinking if they're following the usual trend of moving into private accommodation, which the majority of students do. They have to be vigilant, willing to compromise, looking for potential people they would live best with, that they think they could live best with. It's not it's far from a precise science, but and get at it early. We have a lot of information that the union puts out, a right to rent guide, a list of all the local lats. We're in conversation right now with I found this really interesting. This guy got in touch. He's been running this business in St. Andrews, or service more or less, called Bubble Browse, and it's an aggregate of all available properties in town. We're talking about passing it over to the union as he's graduating, and something that we could integrate. So hopefully, always in a continuous effort, make the private accommodation search easier for students.
Mm-hmm. So there's also been a big problem with the postgraduates this year. Do you want to explain that and this new service, this private accommodation viewing service?
Sure. Well, the current postgraduate accommodation situation, to my understanding, so the Students Association has nothing to do with the allocation of university housing. But we're continuously concerned with student welfare, hence our involvement in this situation. Due to Fife Park's redevelopment, I believe that's largely the circumstance that's caused this. There were fewer postgrad spaces in the university than there have been in past years, creating a greater need for private accommodation for postgraduates. And we went to the mat as a Students Association over the last couple weeks in finding ways to make that search easier. Most people come to St. Andrews because of the community here, because of the special place, because they want to be part of it. And if it's not easy to find a home within the confines of St. Andrews within a relatively close distance, or if it's a distinctly arduous process, immediately that impression is lost. So we've set up one of the solutions. We met with Proctor Factors, which are representatives of all the letting agents in St. Andrews, and asked, what are the major barriers? What do you see right now? And out of that came the private accommodation viewing service. For entrance students, in particular internationals, or students who are working, or maybe mature students even, who can't get away to St. Andrews to view a flat, of which all these letting agencies require before you can tender a lease. That poses a huge barrier. So we set up this viewing service, which is actually a very complex way of explaining a volunteer team. So it's just a group of student volunteers that are viewing flats on behalf of prospective tenants. And it's a solution that we've already seen become immediately effective towards a problem that has been there for years and years and years. So we're looking for kind of the way we reapproach problems, and the way we try and find really simple solutions to things that have made the accommodations situation difficult in the past.
Another part of your manifesto when you were standing, linked to accommodation, is the affordability and how expensive it is to live in St. Andrews. What steps are you taking to mitigate that?
So I met with that. The affordability, regardless of what anyone says, it's a long-term structural economic problem. There is enormous demand and fixed supply on 3 streets on a wet rock in the middle of the North Sea. So simple economics dictates that a huge amount of inelastic demand means that prices will soar and quality of the residences will go down, because a landlord can very easily say, you don't want to pay this for this garbage flat with some mold in the roof, I'll find someone that will, and they often do. So unless you actually build new accommodation that gives preference, it gives a choice between different opportunities for potential letties, then there's no way that's actually going to change. So I've met with, you may know, there are 2 private developers that are working right now, one behind East Sands Leisure Center and one at the old hospital. I met with both of those developers last week, and another thing I said when I was running was the union will not give political support to these builds unless they meet criteria such as hall committees, wardennial teams, the things that make the hall experience special and safe for our students. Also making sure certain rooms are ring-fenced, that the pricing is in line with, something that's useful for students, and it's not, because there is definitely an attitude of people that are coming in the past that have wanted to build these residences that think, St. Andrews, full of posh students, let's take them for a ride and sell 800 a month flats, and that's no good for anyone. So trying to get in really early in the consultancy phases, and we volunteered students to help act as kind of a sounding board when they're trying out different designs, when they're talking about what do you think in terms, what would you be willing to pay for this quality of accommodation, and hoping to influence very early on how that new wave of accommodation works within the system.
Something else in your manifesto was an alumni network. You've recently graduated. What steps are being taken with that? So
we met with our board of trustees yesterday, and we talked at length about this and how we're going to go about it. And it was very exciting. As a board, we're very excited and looking forward to the idea of expanding the way we specifically participate with alumni. I think the angle we'll take on it, like I argued during election week, will be different than development at present, prefacing the student experience, the things that mattered to you during your time here. A lot of people, when asked to kind of nebulously give money into the university as a whole, aren't pulled on the same heartstrings as if they said, listen, you were a rugby player. Do you want to give to the rugby club? Do you want to give to something that was a defining experience in your time here? Or say you were in theater and you love theater and you spent all your time outside your academics. Do you want to give to help put a show on? And I think that's something we can facilitate particularly well. And yesterday we talked about building all this into a major alumni network, a major alumni weekend, pardon me. So if my accent hasn't betrayed it, I'm American. And the way we do alumni activities in the States is a lot different and quite frankly a lot more effective than it is here. And if we could build a alumni weekend that mirrors their student experience, that has events for former sportsmen, former theater people, former whatever it may be, I think we could see a huge change in the way alumni interact with our university and with our union.
You now know who you're working with. You've been working with them for a month. Are you happy with them?
It's an absolute riot. I have the best team I could ever possibly ask to work with. They're incredibly capable. Just wait until Freshers Week. We have a stunning lineup. Leon's done an incredible job. I think it might be one of the best Freshers Weeks ever on record. I mean, I'm biased, but I think genuinely, just sheerly out of some of the names we have in the pipeline, I can't tell you exactly yet, but I think it's going to be pretty special. And Faye's doing a phenomenal job staying on top of our societies, making sure that the redevelopment is going to have minimum impact on them, managing an extraordinarily difficult situation. And Andre is hard away at work, ensuring we have all the representational issues under our thumb from the get-go. Because right now is when we can really plan before chaos ensues from Freshers Week onwards. But no, I couldn't be happier. I work with just incredibly talented, driven people. It makes me want to work all the harder for it. So I'm incredibly blessed.
Pat Mathewson, thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.